stakeholder group leaders an opportunity to respond to, what is wrong with me? To respond to the challenges that we've just heard from Mills and Colin. And Edwin Morse is going to lead this discussion, and I'm going to allow each of the panelists to introduce themselves. I think they'll do it more effectively and efficiently than I would. First, though, I'd like to let Nicole Stempak, one of the people who's helped us to organize this whole event, tell us a little bit about some of our Twitter tags, yes?
Okay, so two things. One, we do have a hashtag, so if anyone is active on Twitter, it's on the easel over to the right. It's KSSATKSU, so feel free to join in there, and feel free to also get connected with our LinkedIn group. It's an open group called Knowledge Sciences Center, where we have a number of discussions started from the webinar, so please join us.
Let me also just let you all know that we have a number of people online, so we're coordinating this with them. Let's try to go until about 12:15, okay? And let's see where the discussions are at that point. If we want to go a little bit longer, we can go until 12:30, and then we still have an hour for lunch, and we'll get back on track this afternoon, okay?
Hello, good. Testing. Edwin Morris here. I'm going to be your host for this panel. We'll introduce everyone individually so they can introduce themselves so you know who's talking and who to talk to after.
Good morning. It's still morning. I'm Wendy Buckowitz. I am with RG Squared, which is my consulting firm. And very briefly, I am a former refugee from knowledge management. I actually started my professional career in knowledge management, co-authored a book on knowledge management, and then promptly left to wander over to innovation, primarily because I was having a difficult time inside of an organization making the case that it was important and that I deserved to be paid well to do it. And innovation seemed like a better place to be because I could point to things that were coming out the other end of that hose. So I am now an independent consultant. I work in Baltimore. I consult on innovation strategy, and I also facilitate groups because that's where a lot of the work ends up going. And I think I was invited here also because I've been working a lot with a group that call themselves social entrepreneurs, primarily in Baltimore. And I am working on a venture with one of them, so I am on the civil society panel, and I look forward to talking about that.
Hi, good morning. My name is Annie Green, and I'm actually by way of George Washington University, starting out with Mike Stankowski, where we first originated a KM program there, which unfortunately has kind of become defunct, and we're trying to revive it. When I first started with KM, it was very interesting because I was actually a systems engineer and process engineering. And when I met with Mike, Mike says, you need to come over on this side. And I said, Mike, I don't believe in it. You know, all companies have to do is improve their processes. And he looks at me and goes, no, but come on. And he sold me, so I've become an advocate for it. A few years ago, I ran into Denise in our travels, and I've hooked onto her since, and she can't shake me loose. We've been following through with like Knowledge Management Education Forum, and our whole focus was to get KM as a discipline. I was also say I'm an academic. I do teach for Kent State. My field that I want to be in is intangible asset valuation, but I realize that I can't get there until we have like a standard in place for knowledge management that is, you know, a discipline coming out of knowledge sciences. So I've kind of backtracked and said, what do we need to do? So I do practice as well, and I've worked in a couple of agencies, Pension Benefits Guarantee Corporation and GSA, in putting things into place, and there I've gathered a lot of information. One of my biggest things is that I think that knowledge management has to be intentional, and unfortunately I think we put the cart before the horse in the fact that it needs to be engineered first, because we can't really manage what doesn't exist. So I guess that's my story, and I'm sticking with it.
Good job. Thanks, man. Okay, I assume this one's on. And it's kind of interesting. My name is Bo Newman, and my introduction starts just prior to where Ann picked up. I got involved in the KM programs back in, or this, what we now become called KM, back in the late 80s. A gentleman by the name of Art Murray, Dr. Art Murray, and I started working together back then. He and I got together at one point. He called me and said, guess what? They're going to let me teach a KM course at GW. And that course that I helped him co-author became the PhD program. That was the pilot for the PhD program that Ann was just speaking of. I'm also, I say I work at the confluence of knowledge sciences, knowledge engineering, and knowledge management, because I believe that there's 3 different major contributions made in there. The sciences provide us with what is possible. The engineers provide answers to the managers who need solutions to real-world problems. And there's a very distinct flow through there. And knowledge flow is also one of my, I've developed methodologies for knowledge flow modeling as a knowledge engineer, understanding that. And I also believe that when we start looking at knowledge, I mean, knowledge enables all the actions and decisions within an organization. That makes it an asset, a very important asset. And we should be able to manage it like an asset. And now we start talking, like Annie said, we start talking about being able to at least track the costs of that asset. There's been so much emphasis on the value. But anyway, that's my eclectic background on this.
I'm John Lewis, and I teach the organizational learning course at Kent State. My consultancy is called Explanation Age LLC. I do thought leadership and visioning workshops, and also I'm a co-founder of the CoHero Institute for Executive Leadership Development of Collaborative Leadership and Learning Organizations to make sure that leadership understands in their language this movement, where we're going with this. So I've been involved in KM since, I guess, before they called it KM, and pretty much from the standpoint of combined technology bent and learning bent. So I started with instructional design degrees, but also COBOL and punched holes in cards many years ago from a technology and a psychology standpoint. And so I really appreciated the presentations this morning because they were different, but they come together, if you will. And I think that a lot of what Mills has to say isn't just sort of futuristic, but I think that some of what we need to have come about will come about because we understand the culture as well as the technology and how they're moving together. So I tend to look at things from that standpoint, and how things come together in a symbiotic standpoint. That's sort of my, there's a reason there's a yin-yang on the back of my book. It's called The Explanation Age, but the symbiotic understanding of things and how things work together is very important. One of the interesting symbiotic things that I study is linguistic relativity. The very words we use isn't just an expression of what we're thinking, but it actually can inhibit how we can think and how we think about this. And I've started jotting down some notes. I actually think that one of the things that's holding us back from some of the things we're talking about are the words that we're using to describe what we're talking about. And so if I get a chance, I'll get into some of those a little bit later.
All right, thank you. Well, I think on the tail end of what you just said, let's go into understanding what can the Knowledge Sciences Center do for this constituency. What would it serve? We'll start right back with you.
Well, when I was making notes this morning and hitting, here's the key questions, I thought probably the most powerful answers that we can come up with in a short amount of time would be if I had a Venn diagram where some questions between the two speakers were similar and on a 2x2 sort of in the same direction. So here's what I wrote down: 10x, 50x. I think Okay, so more and more, okay? If we just sort of generally get that we're not talking about, and actually Dr. Honda says it's not just 10, it's really, so an intersection where we're talking about something much bigger than what we're describing as incremental right now, and the steps that have been made as incremental. And I think that the way that, in general, institutions as formed, and form follows functions through that path, if you study that I believe that the words that we use and the institutions that we have set up are part of the reasons that we are where we are now. So just to throw it out there and get it out there, one of the things that I talk about is there's a reason why in the history of the United States we had a department that did something. It was called the War Department. And all it did is it changed its name to the Defense Department. It's just a name change. Just change a sign on a building. It's just a name. But it's an entire philosophy, entire strategy, entire way of thinking about it. Everything else changed. So one of the things I'm going to throw out there is the industrial age needed a Department of Education. Do we now need a Department of Innovation? Because education is a subset of learning. It's the things we've figured out. There's all the thinking and questioning and trial and error, and we get to a point where we go, okay, this works. Now just go tell them, remember, this works. Go with this. And we send them out and say, okay, be the next pioneers and thought leaders, and we really work those skills. And so if we start from ground one, establishing what a Department of Innovation looks like, it's just an idea I'll throw out that it's one of the things I talk about. If you change that, how would it change our thinking of what we're producing as the next generation comes into, whether it's governmental or corporate jobs or wherever, that we're producing someone that's not ready for the industrial age, which is who we're producing now, but someone who's ready for the knowledge economy. So I'll just stop there.
Thank you. Paul?
Last week I would have discussed this from what does business need, but I've been told to change my hats this week. So this week I'm saying what does the technology domain, my constituents now are all technologists. I came from the workbenches and maybe technicians, so not hard for me to do that. But what I'm going to do, I'm thinking about that. I said that I work in knowledge engineering. Well, as Miles was talking today, I actually added his perspective to mine. And I now have got this diamond with knowledge sciences on one side, knowledge engineering, knowledge management, and knowledge technology paralleling the knowledge engineering. Because in one sense you have knowledge engineering where you're talking about knowledge flows, all this type of things. You may be talking more organizational engineering, more organizational impacts, running, that type of thing, putting the pieces together. But on the other side, there is clearly this huge advance coming in technology. And so we've got this symbiotic relationship between the engineering aspect and the technology, both of which are being informed by the sciences, and both of which are providing solutions to those on the ground. So what can, I see three questions here. What can the technology sector do for the knowledge sciences? What does the Knowledge Science Center, what can they do for the Technology Center? And what is going to be new and unique by that synergy between the technology focus and the knowledge sciences focus? And I think the last one has been answered by Mills. So I'm going to focus on the first two. And that is, first of all, what does the technology sector need from the Knowledge Science Center? They will probably tell you nothing. But what they really need is requirements. They can find us things, and they can give us ideas. That comes actually from the science side. But they really need to know what we need to have automated. We are the ones who are supposed to understand, be it management or science, where the problems are, where the function, what we're trying to accomplish, and then we need to break it down. Okay, we've got three agent types. We've got people, we've got automation, the technology, and then we have the combination of those, which I call the organizational agent. Well, once we've decided, okay, we need this type of functionality in this type of configuration, and as Mills has put out, we've got a wide range of new configurations coming, then we can get around to saying, is that for an individual, or do we need technology to do that? We've got requirements now we can put out to the technologists. The science center, we talked about it as a virtual center. And it really can't exist in this day and age without the support of the current technology. But moreover, I think when we start to look at what this center is going to be, what it could be, we're going to realize that not all the technologies we need are there even to support this center. So the center, we can provide the feed for the technologies and as far as requirements, things like this, from the science side and the management side. They're also going to be instrumental in supporting us from communication, from virtual presence, from being able to represent what we have as more than just data and information. We need the technologists to be able to model the knowledge. I mean, I've worked with the Department of Veterans Affairs now for the last 4 years, building a meta-knowledge repository. What do we know about what we know? How does that knowledge used, acquired, retained, transferred within the organization? We need those technologies move forward. That was just a prototype. We need those real. We need the modeling tools. And I'll tell you one more other thing we need. We're looking at a knowledge scientists. How many of the other sciences have tried to exist without mathematics? Okay, we've got logic, but that's not, there's not a whole lot of, mathematical rigor or mathematical modeling tools available to the knowledge scientists. I'm working on one called the SP Calc. That's going to need to be implemented. There are others that need to be developed and implemented. That's technology. Technology isn't all bit spikes and mag tape or whatever. Technology is technique, methodologies, and everything else. We're going to need support from those realms. So that's the joint. What is it going to look like together? And why and how each of us need the other one. That's, in my humble opinion, from my perspective, what the technology constituents would want to say.
Thank you for the short answer, Bo.
Okay. You only get 2 questions, right? Okay, mine is to support a discipline. I think that knowledge management is boundaryless right now. We have no encapsulation of what it actually is. We have a smorgasbord of all types of sciences and things that are thrown together in it. So I think that the knowledge science or knowledge sciences area will actually bring structure around something that has no structure, and also identify the integration points with other sciences so that we stop the infighting and we begin to realize the piece that we need to support and the piece that we need to send to other areas so that they can support it, so we don't have a lot of duplications. I think that in industry we've had an illusion of people saying, what is knowledge management? I don't think we need to define knowledge management. I think Merriam-Webster has done that extremely well. Knowledge is defined and management is defined. So I think that we need to actually step outside of that and own it. I've known that even in the KM community that people have said, let's take a stealth approach to knowledge management and fool people so that then they know they're doing this. We don't need to do that. I've said in other areas that, if it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, then call it a duck. The point is we need to learn to communicate with others, and they need to learn to communicate with us. I once went into a director's office and they were talking about their business. I said, I don't know your business, but I need for you to teach it to me. So consequently, you don't know my business, so you have brought me here so I can teach it to you. So let's work together to integrate them. If I can't do that, then I cannot help you. So the point is, I think that the knowledge sciences actually brings that together. It supports a discipline that then goes out to academia, industry, and business. And I think we'll be on a solid footing then to move forward with knowledge management.
That was short. Just give an example.
Okay. I don't know if I'm going to be short or not.
Go ahead and
So
ask one more
question. One more. Okay. Well, I'm going to work with the civil society group, and I actually just have a smattering of thoughts. I was really captivated by this kind of funny comment that Dr. Honda laid out for us, that we're willing to spend $150 for a sports shoe, but $150 premium for a tire, maybe per tire. And I was thinking a lot about that, and it made me think about, for the Knowledge Sciences Center, that I think a value shift is needed as well. That's what you were talking about, I think. But I was thinking, well, why am I willing to take my daughter to Dick's and spend $150 for a shoe for her to run track? And yet I do balk at spending $600 extra for my tires on top of whatever I'm spending. And I was thinking that I feel a greater connection to those shoes that my daughter's wearing. Somehow it's more personally meaningful, despite the fact that both there's technology and engineering in both the shoe and the tire. But I feel it's more personally meaningful. I was thinking a lot about that in terms of the Knowledge Sciences Center with respect to civil society. It has to, I think, be personally meaningful. I had a funny conversation with Annie not all that long ago about a course, putting together a course, and I have to say that I've been out of academia. I was just like, I thought, I am so tired with all the language. I understand it, but it pushes things away from me. And I think you were talking about this, the language that we use, especially if the goal is not just to, and I also notice we need to talk about the places that we live, because these distinctions between civil society and business and academia, I think they are starting to blur. And so if we can't talk to one another, if we can't, the more senior people, I can assure you, because I've been hanging out with some 30-year-olds, they don't have as big a problem talking across all of these divides. And I think there aren't enough young people in this room, actually, even today, or in this conversation. And I know, we need to get them here, because they experience things differently than we do. And if the future is here, but it's not evenly distributed, it certainly isn't reflected here. So I think we need to kind of keep all those things in mind as we have these conversations.
Are you calling us a bunch of old folks?
It's only because I get to color my hair. That's it. I'm right up there. Right up there with all of you.
Well, that sounds very engaging to have these types of elements all being actually brought together at this moment, because we've talked innovation, integration amongst not just segments, but populations, and getting a more holistic feel to the knowledge set. So how do you see the persistence of this and the build of the knowledge sciences across all these domains from a short-term perspective to a long-term and a sustainment? How do you see a sustainment model?
I'm just going to very briefly say, one of the things, Denise, we had, I don't even know if you said this or I read this, but that you were very attracted to going back to the Midwest, right? To kind of be part of a community. And I think what really is important in this Knowledge Sciences Center is that we not lose track of it. Even if it has to be virtual, it has to be somehow the connection to the community, right, is very important, because it can become a model for how it then replicates itself into other places. So I think that is the kind of the sustainability piece, is that it has to be, at the same time it's global, it's intensely local. And I think that's kind of a paradox that we have to figure out how to actually maintain.
Okay. Let me see where I go with this one. I think that it is all global. Knowledge is everywhere. So, and being a systems engineer and even thinking iteration, it's going to be applied starting at the lower level of the individual, to the group level, to the organization level, and from the organization into the cities and the country. And I think that with the knowledge sciences, like any other science, I mean, when we look at like life sciences, it doesn't change across the domains. So knowledge science, I think, will stay the same across the domains as well. The difference is that we need to know the scales of economy, and we need to know how to adapt and change them at the levels that they're at. So I'm in agreement with that, and I'm trying to get my hands around how do you actually sustain it, because the sustainment would be with the entrenchment in the culture and the way people live, work, and play. And how we do that is still kind of a mystery. But I do think, and don't get me wrong, I do think that it is realistic, and I do think that it will occur. And I'm going to kind of jump back into research a little bit in that I think sometimes we manage to the wrong levels and we forget that there's a diversity of people and a diversity of things out there. You have different learners, you have different, people learn differently, they use different media. People are not in one bottle. And I want to go back to like a normal distribution curve of, you got 10% that if you say something very generic, they're going to get it regardless of what you do, okay? And you got 10%, I don't care how you put the spin on it, they may not get it, okay? And then you got that 80% that's a variety. And we've got to meet the challenge of that and think that we don't keep catering to the 10% and feeling that if you aren't in that 10%, you're not intelligent, okay? So I think that it's the challenge is on us to learn how to deal with diversity, to deal with, again, getting to the personalization and the customization, and to understand that everybody can arrive at the same point or at a certain time at the same point. And what I like Malcolm Gladwell's work on that, because he kind of tells you, it's the effort that counts. So once you get someone going, they will eventually arrive. Okay.
Go.
Sometimes a long answer is needed to really convey the message. Short term, the connection, the extension model that Denise gave us, the enthusiasm of the Peace Corps, and the durability of the basic franchise model. The mystery in what comes in that's going to be sustainability, we provide for that by providing the environment for emergence. Because we haven't seen it, we don't know what it is. It is a mystery, but one we have to foster.
Well done. Very nice.
Balance.
Thank you, Bo.
Yeah.
So I'm going to stick with the 10x50x theme as it relates to, so think big, as it relates to academic, and that includes K-12 all the way through. What are we doing? How are we looking at our institutions of preparing people, and are they doing that? And how do we need to completely rethink that? So I already talked about a Department of Innovation. It's just a word change, but it would completely change the entire function. What I want to talk about here is, like what's going to cause us, Andy's point is like something has to happen. So I'm going to make a prediction of what could possibly happen. I think that a student's going to show up to school and say, how come you let me bring this object into class and use it even on a test? It's called a calculator for math. And I have this other object as the answer to everything else you're trying to cram into my head. It's the same size. You make me turn it off. You didn't have this when you went to school, but now we do. So why are we still doing it the same way? Every answer you're trying to cram in my head and see how much I can repeat it like a parrot, that's your method, is in this thing. I can find it and use it just like a calculator. Why is that? Why did I get a poor grade? I think the system's skewed, and I'm going to take it to court. And we'll see a court case where the question is in front of us that says, what is the difference between me knowing how to access something, given the amount of information that's out there that we need to have access to, if I can do that? And if that's the real world that we're preparing people to operate in, why are we not doing that? And so that brings me to the next point, which is that in a symbiotic relationship, everything you know, and we call it different things, information, knowledge, and so forth, everything you know is an answer in a symbiotic relationship to a question. And if you think of it that way, we can push a PC to every child on the planet and plunk them in front of it, and they will supposedly have access to everything. And if they don't know levels of questions, question types, questioning skills, they have access to nothing. And so what I see is a change in a focus of knowledge management, access to knowledge and information, to a shift towards innovation and questioning skills.
So reasoning, basic deduction, reasoning.
As a type.
Mm-hmm.
No, I have a follow-on point on your more, 10x, 50x, you know.
Do we have 100? Let's go.
Well, I think you had 1,000. You had like even a trillion X.
Yeah.
IBM did, didn't they? They had like a lot of zeros before their X. Yeah. They had a lot. They had a lot. But one of the things, no, they're a big company. They have to promise a lot. But one of the things that you know, that came up as a theme was, you know, how do we value all of this? And I was thinking that a lot of times we seek to value, you know, we value the end result. Going back to your hose, and I thought, well, wouldn't it be interesting if we could also find a way to value things using that SOFR approach along the way? So that, you know, it's hard to establish, especially since things take time, that you are creating value. Could we, at the Knowledge Sciences Center, also come up with a way of helping to measure the value creation along the way as things are progressing, but in ways that matter in the to the various stakeholders? Because, you know, we certainly in a business are stuck with, you know, financial models. That's just what we're stuck with them. So we have to figure out how to express the value created within that framework. There are other models and other systems that are a little bit easier to express, but I think that to me is a way that you get to we'll probably be dead by the time we get to 50x. I mean, I'll speak for myself. Oh, okay, but you know, how can we know that we're getting there is to me a real question, because I think 50x may be achievable, but if we can't figure out that we're getting there along the way in concrete ways that enable additional and ongoing investment. Because really, when you talk about investing resources in knowledge sciences, you're talking about not putting them somewhere else, and that you have to have a pretty good argument for that. So I was thinking a lot that theme came up variously.
Ed, if I may, at one time in the webinars, we were talking about that conversation, and there are enough built-in limitations and inertia in the current system that if we're actually going to see these very large jumps, we may need a whole new economic model. And that means we can't work in isolation. It's like going into a law school and asking them, where do you teach the next jurisprudence? They don't yet. Well, we need to go into the economics class, the School of Economics, and whoever could contribute and ask those questions. Where's our next economy?
I think you might do better going to the people who create hedge funds.
Ladies first, Bill. Please.
I just want to say thank you. I just wrote that down, especially with our education system. If we start thinking that we can allow these kids or anyone to go out and gather anything from the internet and just use it, we're going to be in a bad state. We have to teach them the application of it. If you are in today's society and you walk into the classrooms I walk into and you see how people have memorized and they can't make unstructured decisions, it will begin to worry you. When you walk out of academe and you go into your business and you sit down and you watch some of the young college students coming in and you realize that they have memorized and they can only do one task and you have to be very explicit at how they do that task, you will begin to wonder or know why we cannot afford to do that. Okay, and this is the things that we need to take forward to our businesses, because if not, we're going to be in dire straits. If they're not willing to put forth the funding to correct what they've already done, because from what I can see, we're talking about funding, but have you looked at the budgets and what they're spending in business right now and what you're getting out of it? Someone has to put that forward and say, you know, we are really wasting money on resources. We have sometimes resources doing things, an entire team doing things that one or two people can do because no one knows the full story. Well, I just need to say that, but thank you.
Well, I'd like to to add to that perspective, thinking the long term. And I'm going to go out on a limb and suggest that even as much as all that you're speaking of, the effort it takes and how long, I'm going to say that's even short term compared to the questions I was raised, the Department of Energy brought to me. How do we manage the knowledge associated with the nuclear waste that we are responsible for in perpetuity? So we're down to the question, how do you not preserve, but perpetuate knowledge for 2,000 to 20,000 years? And while that sounded all well and good, all you had to do was listen to the radio today and realize the Japanese are facing that exact question today with the meltdown of, or with the, not meltdown, but damaged their reactors, because it's either manage that problem they have right now with 400 million gallons of water, whatever it is they're pumping through a day, or are you going to you're going to let the reactor vessel deteriorate and manage that for millennium? These are long-term problems we're looking at. The solutions are, we're going to have to be facing solutions to problems we haven't seen. We have to be laying the groundwork for emergence for not just the next 5 years, not just the next 2 lifetimes, in perpetuity.
Let me just try to piggyback on that thought, and I think one of the reasons that we have that is because of the questions that we ask. If we ask what's in it for me, then we have an education process and business process and a civil society that ends up with an answer to that question. If we started asking ourselves to ask another question, what's in it for us, then we would see a difference in a ripple effect through that question. So in relationship to that idea of questioning versus answer, what's the answer? The other point I wanted to make is that one of the things I really enjoy about teaching at the master's degree level is that I inevitably at least have a couple students in a semester that it's the first time that they've realized that I'm not going to tell them the right answer. That their entire process of an experience of the education system is they want to know the answer. And they're frustrated. And they're, well, how can this, well, there's a couple of answers. Which one is it? And I go, right, which one? Give me your perspective of why you think that's the right answer. Or maybe it's none of those. And at that level, you see a level of, the change curve, sort of frustration, and then, oh, wait a minute, I'm starting to understand sort of the bigger picture between how education, as it's been defined, is a subset of learning. And you start to see the awareness take place. It's a wonderful place to see that happen. And that can't happen at the master's degree level in a knowledge economy. That point in time has to be pushed down into K-12.
Interesting. I'm going to, first of all, I'm finding this conversation extremely stimulating and a lot of fun. I want to thank you all for, for your contributions. And I want to chime in on a couple of things. Like, number one, the art of questioning, the focus on that for innovation, very, very, very strong kind of thought. Some of the stuff about, master students showing up and, they've come up in a culture where they've been looking for answers. Some of that's also about learning to be responsible for your life. I mean, when you realize that the question about the meaning of life is not the answer you're going to get, but the answer you're going to give, those are sort of conversion points or maturation stages kind of questions, and they can happen. We were talking about the thing that got me really excited was Liz's thoughts. Had to do with, okay, what kind of, as we look at a knowledge economy where the knowledge is growing and changing, where the value is on our ability to innovate, learn, scale, not necessarily regurgitate. And
I think that, seeing how profits work, with milestones and the other kind of things, could anybody become computer literate? And he said, well, to some extent it depends on whether you ask them to and whether you organize things in a way that, that is more natural. Kids could do great jobs of programming. And I think, there are things the programs that Denise and I were talking on the ride back across Pennsylvania, about those programs that deal with, just strictly with problem solving. Groups of kids organized, they may have parents or others, serving as coaches, but their job is, they're given certain challenge problems and so on. They're jamborees where they all get together and they put on these, these kind of demonstrations. But the point is that idea of doing independent problem solving, where you do an investigation and so on. When you made the example of the device that has the answer, increasingly it's not just any arbitrary lookup on the internet. It's much more, the appliance, if you will, is going to be much more knowledge intensive. I'm doing a negotiation of a business deal in China. I have a little consigliere in my ear to saying, well, that term probably isn't quite what you want. You might want something else. And when you brought up the hedge funds, VC guys, and so on, it made me think too that this problem solving, this knowledge capacity to exploit, that always knowledge, the value goes to where in the node in the network, where that knowledge exists. I'm thinking of it as a backwater or whatever when they had to try to figure out toxic assets, following the meltdown in 2008, 2009. They had to turn to effectively a hedge that was basically managing a lot of those funds for the various retirement programs and so on, but they were the ones that were in a position to have comprehensive knowledge about what it was that these various asset pools were about. And they literally had to go to these guys, to be able to try to get some valuation of see, how bad it was. So the thought I have is that if you look at kind of futures, we all need to know what the future is. If you're not being blindsided by another financial meltdown or being whipsawed by economic cycles of some kind. There's a whole desire to be able to also be on top, but it's problematic. You don't exactly know what the future is, but it is a hyperstructural reality, and it does exhibit certain kind of currents and so on. But that ability to wield, to be able to work it, was kind of formulated in a super film by Colonel Boyd, when he started talking about OODA loops and the Department of Defense doctrine about knowledge superiority. It's the ability to get on top, learn faster than the other guy, marshal that knowledge, be able to apply it. And that's something that's not fixed, it's not rote, it's not playing tic-tac-toe. So anyway, I'm carrying on, but I'm very, very excited about what you guys are talking about. Denise?
Just want to give the mic to Tom, but before I do that, I want to just challenge us to think about this not from a Fortune 100 company, but from one of these groups. Okay, so you're in Southeast DC. What does this mean to you? Right? Because in the knowledge economy, this wave that's coming, everybody needs to be brought along. We're not bringing just Annie's top 10% along. We need, and the center needs to address everybody.
Thanks for this panel. It's been very stimulating, as other people have said. I would like to throw in 2 points, building on what you've said already. The first is young people coming in and they're thinking differently and doing things differently. I'm very concerned that the key idea in knowledge management and in knowledge sciences, which is that knowledge ain't just information, is something you have good reason to believe in. That's the key thing. It's something you have good reason to believe in and act on. That the standards of validation that we have are just going down and down and down. Now, people have always wanted quick and easy answers, and now they can get them really quickly and really easily. We see the traditional journalism under challenge from the bloggers and everyone else. And the young generation coming forward, taking this as the way that they get their information about the world. On the other hand, they have this idea that they can somehow affect world events by tweeting something. Now, a canary can tweet as well, doesn't mean that it causes changes in the Middle East. I think this whole idea that fast, quick, short, and easy is the way forward is something that's a real challenge for us. And so one of the things I'd love to hear discussed over the rest of the day and tomorrow in the panels is how can we actually uphold this idea of knowledge being something that is tested and even validated to some extent as being crucial for it. I'll just give one example. I'll get back to two examples. One is, right now we are having a fundamental knowledge management exercise going on in Congress and in the public about Syria. This is what it's all about. People are going to make decisions about what actually happened, what have been known, what should we do about it, and they're also going to make counterfactual decisions like, if we don't do this, then what will happen? Crucial things with huge ramifications, knowledge management. And tomorrow we have an anniversary of something which is probably the biggest failure of knowledge management in American history. So they are key things. So that's something I like to talk about. Another point is, one of the panelists talked about the staff approach to knowledge management, and if it's a duck, call it a duck. Well, in a strong, proud moments to say, yes, that's absolutely right. But in other times, you might agree with us, you have to go in and talk the language they want to talk. There are organizations where KM rose high and then sank to the nadir and is riding high again. In some places, it's gone down and never come back. I would say, if it's a duck and they're a goose, then tell the duck to stand up straight. The prejudice against KM, I think, and the knowledge sciences.
No, I do it, and I do agree. But I got to come back on that. I do agree with you, but I think that personally, I don't think that has worked. I've seen where we have changed, and we've changed the web, and we've changed everything. And what I'm saying is, and let me flip the coin on this, okay? I'm saying that we say we need to communicate. We are failing to communicate. You're absolutely right. We need to speak their language, but we need to speak their language in the context of knowledge management. See, they bring the business area. And even like with the civil side of it, yes, I'm not going to go and talk highly technical for someone who's not going to understand that. But I'm still going to give them the basis of knowledge management. I'm going to speak to them in a language that they can understand. But in the long run, I want it to align back to the terms that it's supposed to so that they can learn what those terms are. So I totally agree with you, but I do believe that we need to own it and we need to claim it. I mean, come on, think about it. We teach kids to speak certain things, and it's almost like in California with the Ebonics thing, okay? They say, the African-American kids, let's teach them a different language because that's what they speak. I grew up in a home that I did not speak Ebonics to my parents because I might have lined it up on the floor. But when I went outside, I could speak it fairly easy to my friends, okay? And I knew how to adapt. Now, the other thing is, if you're going to change for the kids like that and speak it in their life, they're not going to do well in school. If a kid does not know that a car is a vehicle, we have a serious problem. So I'm not saying it's not right or wrong, but I'm just saying I think we failed with that and that we need to really rethink. I just want to clarify one other thing. Denise said, and 10%. I don't have the 10%. I have the 80%. So yeah, I strongly believe, like even with Wendy, okay, I just want to clarify my stance. I strongly believe that even with Wendy and what Mills has said, be on top. We are training everybody to be on top, which is ridiculous. I tell my classes sometimes, what will happen when your child went to McDonald's and there's no one behind the cash register because you know what? We taught them that wasn't someplace where they should be. So we have to have that middle class, and we got to integrate it properly. You know what? When I was a high school student, I worked at McDonald's, and I made good money. I didn't have to be on top. When I went to school, I was a secretary. I loved it. I enjoyed it. And you know what? Nobody else had to really take those positions because as a student, I was making enough to survive. And we tend to forget that. We don't tell our students that anymore, and they want the top job. Okay? So
just one quick point where I'd like to throw in the question is knowledge management an overarching discipline, or is it really quite specific. The reason I say, if someone goes on and they really want business analysis, business process analysis, but you look at it and you know they really want knowledge management, that's not a problem for me because I see this as part of KM. And so if they want a goose and I've got a duck, then I will talk business process analysis, which is a goose, rather than a duck, which is knowledge management. But you can effectively be doing the same thing.
Absolutely, and I actually do that because it's multidiscipline, and so it actually, when you go to talk to people, let me also explain, knowledge management, we go in there and say we're going to do knowledge management. This is why we need a discipline. We don't walk into a place and say, I'm going to do financial management. We go into a place and we talk to them at accounts receivable, we talk to them at accounts payable, we talk to them at general ledger. They know the distinct parts of it. Knowledge management, as I said earlier, does not have that. It's boundaryless, okay? And it has no components to it, so you can't go in and speak to them. Process management is core to knowledge management, so let's not separate them. You know, when I improve my business and my operations, what am I improving? Okay, so the thing is we got to know those pieces so that we can talk to them in their language, because with business process, you adapt it to their language and talk how you're going to improve their operations. So that's my whole point about the Knowledge Science Symposium. We got to pull those pieces together. I'm sorry.
I want to thank Dr. Bedford for inviting me to come along from Jerusalem to be part of this very extremely important meeting. I'm not a knowledge management scholar or expert, but I can at least put it in some kind of perspective. I taught advanced demography course, and during like 4 months, I covered the major demographic transitions our world experienced, and we thought that the most important transitions are summarized in fertility transition, mortality, immigration transition, and later on urbanization, family transition. And I think that it will be more important to teach our students the knowledge transition that our world is experiencing. This is something missing, and at least we are trying to initiate such a center to educate teachers as well as students what it means to understand what we need from this like information technology and everything related to knowledge available to us as human beings. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Let me just introduce Dr. Naphan, who has come to us from Coast University, and I should have asked everyone who spoke to introduce themselves, to tell us who they are. But I'm very excited that Dr. Naphan and I will be putting together a partnership between our two universities for faculty exchange, student exchange. We're going to work on developing an undergraduate KM curriculum. So shows us that the power of knowledge sciences is global. Right, it's essential, right? So I should give this back to Edwin, who's in charge. Oh, I'm sorry. No, I'm just the carrier of the mic. All right, it's just a little after 12:30, so we're cutting into our lunch, but I'll let you guys decide.
Hi, I'm Mary Harrison, and I am coming here today from Burlington, Vermont, which is, when we're talking about smart cities, if you took the largest city in each state of the United States and made a list of them, we are the smallest, largest city of the 50 states. So I'm very interested to hear whether or not smart cities would apply to Burlington. That would be a very interesting question. I wanted to urge everybody during the next day and a half to not forget that even though we sometimes define KM as being the intersection of people, processes, and technology, that technology piece might also be processes, or might also be tools and techniques, like, for example, AI, appreciative inquiry, or something like that. And so let's not forget about that, because that might be what's behind bringing some of our very important models to the 10% or what have you.
Good point.
It seems like what I'm hearing is that there's a continuum along a number of different lines here, and it seems like there's the we need it now versus we need to look at the long view. We need it. We have the older folks versus we have the younger folks. And we also have we have this big, huge, overarching view, but then we also have this very, very personalized exchange that, often needs to take place. You have, what stuck in my mind is the overarching view that Mills Davis presented about the 10x, 50x, but then I had this very small exchange with Matthew Hughes here of a business card, and he had told me, well, he had been trying to get a hold of somebody at USAID, and he hadn't been able to get a hold of anybody. And because I'm with USAID, I said, yeah, I can get you in touch with that person. With a person. So that was that very personalized, he needs it now, he needs it a personalized touch, and we provided an exchange here, and what to look at that is that little exchange might have overarching consequences for both of our agencies. So I guess what I'm trying to put here is that I agree with, I think it was Anne who said it's kind of boundaryless, but to also look at where's all the continuum here and trying to connect all the dots, and to not only think of, well, let's think of 20,000 years into the future, but also think of that little business card that we exchanged today.
Good. While we're moving the mic across the room, I'll just make a quick point. There is that topic in that I would say even fear that I hear by some people in KM that how can this possibly be a discipline? It's boundless, and we need to define where those boundaries are. And again, I think that the words that we use in any domain is going to hold back our thinking. And I'll just add that the way I describe that is to say that math is a lens to everything. And if we describe it not in terms of boundaries, but as a lens, that's how I approach the field, that the boundaries of it is really through the lens that you have, in terms of if you're basically trying to understand what's there in the knowing, in the process of the gaining of knowing as the lens, versus math and the lens of measuring whatever is in front of that lens. So I describe it as a lens, not necessarily boundaries.
Okay, I just want to make one more comment on your point on the way public education uses tools. The graphing calculators that you talked about are at a cost of about $3 a piece. They require no connectivity. They require very little knowledge, and it's a very quick interface to use. The smartphone is about $400 if you want to really get one, or $300. It requires connectivity. Do not be falsely led the fact that this is ubiquitous. Yes, the statistics say that everybody has a cell phone in the United States. Guess what? There are a lot of places that do not have it, a lot of places in the world that do not have it, and knowledge management can't happen until you have ubiquitous access and ubiquitous training to that access. And I'm afraid that as we evolve, that we have wonderful expectations that come quickly. And I would love to give every kid in a class that I would teach one of these, and also pay for their data charges. Because having one of these without data connectivity is almost, well, there's a lot of utility in some of the things that are here without connectivity. But the answers to everything in the world, yes, do exist. And then the last point is, don't fall into the expectations of our reality. And I'll give you a personal example. I have 5 kids, and we had a death in the family recently, and we got on Google Plus and we had a discussion. And I have kids in Pennsylvania, kids in Florida, Louisiana, and one in France. And we got together as a family. That was a different experience for us. Not getting on the phone, but getting on and having the facial reactions when we announced that my wife's mother had died. Now, the other thing that got frustrated was, maybe I'm just unique in this case. I tell my kids, why don't you ask your brother about this or your sister about this? And they text. I said, why don't you just call them? Why don't you call them? Then I realized they don't want to interrupt what they're doing. They want to asynchronous discussion and let them come back with their knowledge. They want to pass their structures onto the new way that people are learning and communicating because it's different. So those are my 2 points.
Thank you.
I just have to respond real quickly. I think that your cautionary points are well taken. My only point is that when I say I make a prediction, I don't think it's tomorrow. And I'll also point out that for progress to happen, it starts somewhere. And we can't say that the entire universe cannot move forward because everyone's not ready to take that first step with us. We find those pockets. And I'll also point out that your cost point of the cost of a calculator today is accurate, but that's not the cost point of the calculator when they started becoming involved and be allowed to be used on tests. And so the process has to start somewhere, and that dynamic model is what I'm describing.
Well, yeah. Actually, I'm not going to try and respond to the questions. What I want to do is highlight some of the things I've been hearing, and hopefully that over the next day and a half we can talk about it. The idea of the standards of validation and the dichotomy between knowledge as truth and knowledge as it is as meaning perceived by each and every one of us. Those are 2 separate sides of a coin that is out there that the Knowledge Sciences Center should be equipped. And when we're talking about a plan, we're talking about equipping a Knowledge Science Center for studying these type of things. We talked about it being this whole idea of continuums. Well, the space is actually defined well. It's an n-dimensional space right now. And every one of those vectors is a continuum, but they're all bounded. And so someplace in there is a definition of the space we are in, but that space doesn't need to exist in isolation. There's also, this space is viewed differently by each perspective. That's this concept of lenses that John was talking about. And then there's this, what do we expect our constituents to have? And I really hope we really get into these. Are they ubiquitous? You know, you were bringing up the question of whether or not we can expect certain characteristics to be ubiquitous across the globe. Is that realistic? I mean, is it in fact that we have this world of continuums, but not necessarily homogeneous distribution within that space? These are all just things I've been hearing you all mention, and I think I've captured them, so at least from my group, we can be talking about them over the next day and a half.
Hey, hi, Bob Lewis with the Corporation for National and Community Service. We've been the AmeriCorps, the Senior Corps, and several other programs that encourage volunteerism in communities. So I hear us talking a lot about change, right? There needs to be change in what we know and how we know it. There needs to be change in education. There needs to be change in economics. There needs to be change in how we relate to each other as classes in our communities, right? We've talked about having established value and past focus versus future focus. And it comes to I am, and maybe a number of you are change averse. Many of us, at least as we reach a certain age, you know, and really, thank you very much. Yeah, I just found my glasses. I can read the rest of it I've written now. They also heard us talking about collecting and connecting. Right? I also heard us talking about community and the valuation not of the economic goods and services, but the values that we share in community. And so it occurs to me from where I sit, and I started there, I'll end there, that, you know, perhaps we should look at the ways that we do as a people, as neighbors, as humans, connect, share values, give and share amongst ourselves in ways that bring together people in ways that are very, very different and that can be practiced by and valued by and learned by very different people. One short example, and then I'll give this up. At the national conference that we held very recently here in D.C., we heard from three very different people. In Brazil, many of you may know, an activist and an active political figure here in the district, spoke and led a conversation between Karl Rove, who led President Bush's efforts to become elected and re-elected, and David Plouffe, who led President Obama's efforts to be elected and re-elected. And you know what? As much as you might think, they would have been at each other's throat, and here's the subject they would have been, make no mistake about it. They had a love fest. Because, personally, yes, they had to be nice to each other because they were on the same stage, but they came together and talked about what they were very passionate about. Each of them, every year, mobilizes thousands, if not millions, of volunteers who share values and come together to get important things done with volunteerism.
Yeah.
That's the value I'm interested in.
Nice. Yes.
Very nice.
I just want to talk about two topics. One you brought up about validation of knowledge. You know, one has to be careful really is, in one sense, your knowledge is not validated at all. You just throw it out there and people think it's true knowledge. On the other hand, you can validate for whole life, basically. You never put out anything. So what we have done really at Goodyear, we have generated different level of knowledge. So level 1, 2, 3, you can call it A, B, C, and clearly describe what is the level of maturity of that knowledge. Now, the final level is the knowledge as when it is generated, it should be put out for people to use with caution. Because everyone has seen it, you can go on forever without any putting anything out. Second thing is my discussion about short-term versus long-term here really is. It's fascinating discussion, really is. I believe we need both. You can't just be one camp versus the other. There is no long-term, just remember that really is. You don't have jobs, you don't have anything, you can, what you want to think about. So really is, in this nonsense, really the whole scheme of things, you have to look at a portfolio approach. You have to look at something which might deliver value in the short term, and then you show that to whoever your constituents are, and then by trying to do those long-term things. When we talk about innovation, you know, I've spent all my life in innovation, really is. And innovation, basically, the portfolio we have, there are three which are very long-term oriented projects. Then we have something which will be midterm, basically, is, but we also have something which will deliver by the end of this year and next year, really is.
But if you have basically projects, try to divide them into different phases so that when you complete a phase, you can deliver something really is rather than waiting for that time 5, 10 years down the road. So let's be practical about it really is, and we can talk about, but in practice we have to deliver that in time, not time to deliver that in the future.
Okay. May I suggest that we let me suggest that, and I think Amanda's going to tell us what inches, but let me just suggest that this is a great conversation, and I'd like to continue the discussions this afternoon in a fairly loose fashion. So we will have our panels, and we'll continue to have audience participation in those panels. And I'm not going to worry so much about the timelines. We're just going to have the discussions we need to have, okay?
There is also I was informed that. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. So if you have this badge, you're supposed to be escorted by either me or Mary Moulton, who's in the back, who you met this morning. So if you do